Have you ever seen a Voltron deck and thought, I think we should make it 10 times worse? Well, let me introduce you to a different style of deck called semi-Voltron. Now, I don't mean actual like semi-Voltron of you just add a couple of equipments to the deck and hit with your commander and call it a day. I'm talking about your commander is a value engine that sets up a really big creature, and that creature deals a majority of your damage, or you do things based off of that creature. Before I explain what I truly mean by this and give some really good examples, you guys should all like and subscribe because a majority of you guys are not subscribed, and you might as well like the video while you're at it. So what do I mean by semi-Voltron? Well, I basically mean cards like, I simply mean the decks that we're going to be talking about today. These commanders, in some form or fashion, create a creature that's going to get really, really big and deal a ton of damage to your opponents, while also providing some sort of value or having some sort of easy strategy that can also be built around. So let's get right into it with our first example of this, starting off with a pretty common one, Minsc and Boo. Minsc and Boo, Timeless Heroes, says, when Minsc and Boo enters the battlefield and at the beginning of your upkeep, you may create Boo, a legendary 1/1 red hamster creature token with trample and haste. Then its +1 ability, you put 3 1/1 counters on up to 1 target creature with trample or haste. And -2, you sack a creature. When you do, Minsc and Boo, Timeless Hero, deals X damage to any target, where X is that creature's power, and if the sacrificed creature was a hamster, you draw X cards. So this is exactly what I mean. We're going to make a creature token, and we're going to buff up that creature token, and that creature token is going to deal a majority of the damage for us. Now, these decks, in most cases, are going to be a lot slower than others. You're going to have to play a little bit smarter. Your goals should be focused on having a full hand and plenty of interaction, and then you should worry about dealing actual damage with these big creatures. We're trying to maximize the fact that we can get rid of these creatures, we can buff these creatures, we can have these creatures be a massive target, because at the end of the day, it's just going to be a creature token. So with something like Minsc and Boo, the biggest thing we're trying to do is take advantage of the cards like Soul Majesty, Rishkar's Expertise, Hunter's Insight, or Return of the Wild Speaker that are going to draw us a ton of cards for having a really big creature. We're trying to get Minsc and Boo out by turn 3, and sometimes turn 2 if we get a Soul Ring, and immediately get a 4/4 creature. You're then going to hit somebody, and you're going to hopefully untap with this 4/4 creature. It's pretty hard to get rid of it as early as turn 3. Then the quote-unquote combo is super simple. We have a variety of combat tricks, a variety of sacrifice effects, a variety of Soul Majesty effects that are all going to make Minsc and Boo absolutely huge. So on the very next turn, you can +1 Minsc and Boo, make it a 7/7, hit a combat trick, and play something like a Hunter's Insight. Or if you have no other way of drawing, the commander itself allows you to draw. So Minsc and Boo is a 4/4. You play Giant Growth on it, and then you sacrifice it to its own ability, allowing you to draw 7 cards and deal 7 damage to any target, which is absolutely massive. Now, as much damage as these decks that I'm about to talk about can do, your goal is to play a lot slower, and your goal is to control the game. All of these decks run cards like Chandra's Ignition, they all run a couple board wipes, and they have plenty of interaction. This is because having only 1 to 2 creatures on your board means that you could be very targeted heavily. So you need to play your cards right, you need to sequence properly, and you need to make sure that you're always having a full grip of cards. So these decks really focus on the card draw. If you want to see this Minsc and Boo list, as well as the other 2 lists we're about to get into, you can check the link in the description. And if you're liking the video so far, feel free to leave a like. Let's move on to our next one, which gets a little bit more complicated, but still just as fun. Pia Nalaar, Chief Mechanic, is the backup commander to that Living Energy precon we just talked about. This is the reason why so many of those Thopter cards are in that precon, because this commander could be the backup commander, and a lot of those cards that we got rid of from the Saheeli deck should be going into this one. Pia Nalaar says, whenever 1 or more artifact creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you get 2 energy counters. Then at the beginning of your end step, you can pay 1 or more energy, and if you do, you create an XX colorless vehicle artifact token named Nalaar Aetherjet with flying and crew too, where X is the amount of energy spent this way. So what are we trying to do with Pia Nalaar? Well, I know I said these kinds of decks are not aggro decks, and they're a lot slower, which is true to an extent. But with Pia Nalaar, the goal is to have a turn 1 Thopter, a turn 2 Thopter, a turn 3 Pia, and hit your opponents. These Thopters come in all shapes and sizes, and when I say Thopter, I just mean an artifact creature with flying. Something like Silver Raven on turn 1, into a Gleaming Geardrake on turn 2, into Pia Nalaar and hit your opponent in the face, is going to allow you to have a 4/4 vehicle on turn 4. which is not crazy. But we have plenty of other energy creators like Whirler Virtuoso, Gonti's Aetherheart, Aethersphere Harvester, and of course Bespoke Battle Wagon. These cards are going to do great, and you can easily get up to a 10/10 vehicle, which is really hard to actually deal with. It's not a creature until it's crewed, so you need to have artifact removal specifically. But who wants to get rid of a useless vehicle? Removing a vehicle always feels so terrible, so it usually is going to stick around. Another great thing about this deck is the amount of Thopters that we end up actually making. These Thopters are going to serve as really good blockers for the deck, but they're also going to be really good fodder for something like Psy Master Thopterus, allow us to get affinity for artifacts for our Thought Monitor and Thoughtcast, and deal a lot of really good chip damage to draw us cards with something like Bident of Thassa or Thopter Spy Network. These 1/1s are going to be extremely useful because we also have an assortment of other vehicles with either Crew 1 or Crew 2 or 3 that you can use a couple of Thopters for. Then what we're trying to do is play a Start Your Engines, a Full Throttle, or Relentless Assault in order to hit again with our crazy vehicles, as well as our 1/1 Thopters. This deck is extremely interesting and also very, very budget conscious, costing only $28. This deck is an extremely interesting build around and is quite the true definition of kind of Voltron. I can't tell if the token is a blimp or is more like a cruiser, but either way, having a 10/10 cruiser coming your way is absolutely scary and very much possible with a deck like this. So check out this list if you're looking for a semi-Voltron that has a really cheap cost and a really interesting play pattern. And now the last semi-Voltron commander, which I believe is the most efficient semi-Voltron commander, is what inspired this video in Saruman the White Hand. Have you ever wanted to play Grixis Spellslinger, but always felt like you were stuck there with no creatures on the board due to the variety of spells you could actually add to the list? Well, I was too, until I found out about orcs. Oh yeah, orcs. The goal, similar to Minsc and Boo, is to try to turbo out a Saruman on turn 3, and by turn 4 and on, we are trying to cast a ton, and I mean a ton, of non-creature spells. There are only 5 creatures in this list, and all of them are meant to make your orc as big as possible. Besides that, it is simply a Grixis Spellslinger list that's also just able to utilize the massive, and I mean massive, orc army that you're going to get. I'm telling you, when you play something like a Treasure Cruise or a Dig Through Time in the same turn, then follow that up with a Widespread Brutality, then you hit somebody in the face and you fling this creature, I promise you, 1 or more players are going to die. This orc army gets to 20/20 extremely quickly. This deck is loaded with mana, loaded with card draw, and loaded with interaction, all just to get ready to hit them in the face as hard as possible. And it is extremely budget friendly, being only $30. You can check this list out as well as the other 2 previous lists we talked about in the description below. Now let's talk a little bit about how you would actually play these kinds of decks. The goal obviously is to make this one creature as big as possible, and you don't care nearly as much as protecting your commander. But not only do you not care too much to protect your commander, you also don't care that much to protect the creature itself. Every single deck has ways to utilize the creature dying, and every deck has a way to make this creature over and over and over again. It's also weird because unlike normal Voltron, neither piece really gets that much removal thrown its way. Sure, you could kill Saruman, but you're still having to deal with a 20/20 orc. Sure, you can deal with the 20/20 orc, but it's going to come right back. Both pieces are just as valuable. Same goes with Pia Nalaar. Do you kill the Pia Nalaar, which is otherwise a pretty useless creature? Or do you somehow try to remove a vehicle of all things? Why would you not spend that artifact removal on a stacks piece? Or an extremely valuable mana rock? Why would you use it on a vehicle of all things? And with Minsc and Boo, half the time you're sacking your own creature anyways. So is it even worth it to throw removal at a token just for it to immediately come back the very next turn? That is probably the biggest draw to decks like this. Other kind of Voltron commanders have you get tons of equipment or some sort of buff on that creature, which means that it becomes that much more valuable to kill that creature. Whereas if you play a go for the throw on my 10/10 hamster, I have plenty of ways to either sack it in response, I have plenty of ways to draw cards at instant speed from it, or I have ways to fling it right at your face. The same goes with the orc army. Why would you kill the orc army when on your end step, I'm going to cast 7 spells and it's going to be right back to being a 20/20? But you don't care about killing the commander because, again, it's still a 20/20 on the battlefield. All I'm saying is these decks definitely have a very, very interesting play pattern with a semi-Voltron theme. Again, you're not all in on the commander and you're not all in on the token. Usually you're kind of a mixture of 2 or 3 strategies. Minsc and Boo being a red-green kind of stacksy control deck with a lot of card draw and a lot of interaction, as well as being able to deal a ton of damage straight out of the command zone. Pia Nalaar is definitely more of an artifacts Thopter deck than it is a 10-10 vehicle deck, but it still has a 10-10 vehicle in it. And Saruman definitely is just a Grixis spellslinger deck that just happens to make a 2020 orc now and again. Either way, these decks are loaded with power without breaking your budget. So if any of these decks interest you, please go check them out in the description. Let me know what kind of semi-Voltron commanders you guys like to build. And feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more decks like this. Thank you guys all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys all next time.